Hello and welcome to the International Society for Physical Activity and Health podcast. Today's podcast is one in a series of 9 podcasts on the 8 investments that work for physical activity. The 8 investments that work for physical activity are a call to action for everyone, everywhere, including professionals, academics, civil society and decision makers, to embed physical activity in national and subnational policies. It's time to get into our podcast for today with your host, Matthew Tepi Mclaughlin.
Okay, today I'm here with Professor Tracy Kolbe-Alexander, the past chair of the Education Committee for ISPAH. How are you doing, Tracy?
Hi, Tepi. I'm good, thanks. And you?
Yeah, good. So your investment that you led was the workplaces investment. Can you describe this investment?
Well, Tepi, in a nutshell, I like to think of workplaces to adults what schools are to children. And essentially, this investment focuses on how we can promote physical activity and health in the workplace as a setting. It's based on the Global Action Plan for Physical Activity as well, or it's supportive rather of the Global Action Plan for Physical Activity, as well as the overall WHO model, which has identified workplaces as a best place setting or an ideal setting for health promotion for adults. You know, most people spend about a third of their waking hours at work, and hence this is a good place to promote health. And I would just like to point out, even in the COVID pandemic that we've just experienced, even though people are working from home, it's still regarded as a good setting, and it can still be used as a catalyst to get people to move more and sit less.
I was going to ask about that, yeah. So is it applicable for all workplaces? Because I know you used the analogy that similar to schools. I suppose in a way schools, they're all there to do majority seated education. Is this something that applies to, say, office workers as well as construction workplaces and all different types of workplaces?
I think that's the beauty of what we've proposed in this investment, is the importance of ensuring that the health promotion program is tailored for the workplace. So it might be that in office workers, as you say, that the focus would be largely around standing up and taking some movement breaks. But for someone in the construction industry, we might have encouraging policies and interventions around stretching before physical activity, or rather before work. So there are ways to reach all workers of different job demands and also different settings. And just to add that previously, there are many workplaces around the world that are doing their level best to try to promote health and well-being. But what often happens is that there are groups of employees, like shift workers or people based at the regional office, they're not at head office. They don't always get sort of the full workplace health promotion program experience that someone at head office might do. And so what we're trying to do in our investment is encourage workplaces to find ways to reach those hard to reach employees. So that's the long answer. So the short answer, Tepi, is it applies to all types of settings and sectors and job demands.
I think my next question might be dependent on which context it's in.
Okay.
How does this investment boost levels of physical activity?
Well, so what we do know is that physical activity has many benefits specifically for the worker. So, for example, physical activity is associated with reduced absenteeism. It's associated with reduced burnout. It's also associated with a reduction in fatigue. Many workplaces have occupational health and safety procedures and initiatives. And for us, it's about linking physical activity into those initiatives. So in terms of how it helps people to become more active, we need to get the workplaces as well as employees see the benefits of becoming more physically active, and also what I would refer to as safe physical activity for those that are in occupationally demanding tasks. So even if we think of people that have, let's think of doctors or nurses, or you mentioned construction workers earlier on, they might have a big challenge with fatigue. That's one of their big issues that they need to deal with, fatigue. So for them, getting them to be physically active will actually play a role in helping them to manage their fatigue and feel less fatigued, if you like, and increase vigor. Other occupations have high loads of mental stress and anxiety. And again, getting them to be more physically active will help them deal with those demands of their jobs. The way we get these different workers to move more and sit less will be different depending on the sector, as you say.
All right. So we know that it's important for workplaces to do this stuff. So who is it in workplaces that this investment is most relevant for? Who are the stakeholders that can make the changes?
So typically in workplaces, it might be your human resources manager. Some workplaces might have a wellness officer or a wellness manager. But I would say that this investment targets the workers. It targets the occupational health and safety officers, but it also targets the CEOs and chief financial officers, because what the evidence shows is that in order for a workplace intervention to be successful, there needs to be a culture of wellness throughout the workplace, having a holistic approach. And you really do need solid support where the health and wellness of employees is embedded into the company's strategic plans and goals. So I would say it's targeted to everyone that's in the workplace itself.
Yeah. We talked in the schools podcast about the school being its own mini system. And
right.
In a way, it also seems like the workplace. I've got a frog in my throat. Not ideal for a podcast. So yeah, we talked about it being a system, and I think that seems to be sort of similar here, that the workplace trying to get the change is like a little mini system in itself.
You're spot on, Tepi, and I'll give you some relief while your frog is jumping out your throat. But you're spot on. You know, in the schools, we speak about a whole of school approach, and we certainly speak about a whole of work approach, or having a holistic approach to the implementation of physical activity in the workplace. And one of the strategies that we want to encourage people to use is to establish a health and wellness committee and workplace champions. So even though this might be seen as the role of the occupational health and safety manager or the wellness manager or human resource manager, the successful workplace health promotion programs involve the employees, where the employees are part of it and they are the champions. And so again, it helps to have this whole of community involvement. The other way it's similar to schools is that part of another strategy for successful workplace intervention is to create a solid environment. And I'm talking about a physical environment to support health and well-being in the workplace. You know, stairwells that are pretty and beautifully marked, shower facilities, encouraging active transport to and from work. So I think some of the things I'm mentioning might sound similar to the schools, but this time it's targeting the adults.
And it links in nicely with Professor Jasper Schipperein's investments, the active travel and the active urban design stuff that you were mentioning for the workplace.
Absolutely. And again, it also links into other things we've mentioned in this investment document in terms of taking a systems-based approach.
Okay, coming towards a close then, and the rather big question of what are the key recommendations for policy, practice, and research?
Okay, Tepi, so let me break that down for you. I think from the policy perspective, I would think of the policy implications on two levels. So the first level is the workplace policy itself. So whichever company we are working in. And that workplace policy needs to be tailored for the particular sector and setting. So if it's a multinational company, they need to consider how they can reach each employee in different countries, or if it includes people of diverse tasks. So we want to ensure that the office worker has as much access to the policy and programs as someone that's working on a field doing some engineering task, let's say. The policy at the workplace also, as I mentioned earlier, needs to promote a culture of health. So it might include things like having walking meetings, ensuring that food provided at staff meetings are healthy. It might be giving staff paid time to exercise. As we've mentioned before, in people that are shift workers or have physically active occupations, there might be some stretching or even muscle strengthening policies to help them do their job. But importantly, the policies need to be disseminated to employees, because sometimes employees don't even know that a policy exists. Then the other level of policy, I would say, would be at a local or national government level, where they could implement things to incentivize workplaces that have been shown to have good and effective workplace health promotion programs. So it might be a 1% tax rebate. And the World Economic Forum has proposed that in the past, where companies get a tax rebate for implementing programs. Other things that have worked in other countries might be companies have to pay 1% of their profit towards a global fund for that particular country, and that fund then gets used to finance workplace health promotion programs in workplaces in that country. So that's at sort of a bigger policy level. In terms of how to get workplaces going, in terms of practice, what can they do to get this workplace health promotion program going? The first step is really to conduct a needs analysis. See what the main needs are in that particular workplace. What's the drivers? You know, in my experience, and I've done quite a bit of workplace health promotion research, and I used to go in with the message, physical activity helps to prevent heart disease. Employees are not interested in heart disease. They're interested in fatigue. They're interested in work-life balance. They're interested in safety. So this needs analysis will help to create the narrative for how we can tailor this according to what that workplace needs. Then the second step would be to establish a workplace committee and identify champions. The champion model has been shown to be effective to engage and reach hard to reach people. You know, these are workplace peers or your employee peers. So it's really imperative that you have a champion model, I think. And the committee would also come up with initiatives that they can then implement in that particular workplace. And then it's really important that they include evaluation. And I think that perhaps leads on to some of the research components. And I think from the research perspective sometimes the word research might be intimidating for people in the workplace. And I would often prefer to use a term like evaluation. Evaluate the impact of what you are doing. Typically, these programs are funded, and the chief financial officer would want to see what's his return on investment. So I think that's one of the important outcomes the research should show, is the return on investment. So it's showing the economic value as well as the social value, improving morale and so on among staff, because that will help with retention. But then, of course, we are looking at trying to measure changes in physical activity behaviors and enjoyment as well, for example. So I think there is quite a bit of research that has been done in pockets in workplace health promotion, but what's encouraging to see is that there's more and more research coming out on the whole of workplace approach. So not just doing one teeny tiny little walking program and evaluating that. It's evaluating the workplace as its own microcosm or its own system, and using multiple modes and multiple kinds of programs to reach workers, because not everybody wants to go on a walk. Some people might want to do something else. So I'm not sure if that answers your research question.
No, it does. That's a really nice wrap up. And I think the two things that I take away from that is that, yeah, the workplace is a system. And the second one, in terms of engaging people to make this happen, that it's not just about the physical activity outcomes. It's about those co-benefits. It's about the things that the workplaces are interested in, such as absenteeism. And all of those that come with it. So we'll wrap it up there. Thank you for joining us today, Tracy. That was really great.
I just want to say one more thing, Tepi. You know, if people are listening and they feel like, oh, it's just so big and so much to implement a holistic workplace health promotion program, one of my favorite sayings is you eat an elephant one bite at a time. So while it might be overwhelming to think you have to have this big overarching and multi-component approach, just start with the low-hanging fruit and start with what you can, and then eventually you'll take more and more bites and eat your elephant.
I love that. Thank you, Tracy. Thanks.
Pleasure. Bye-bye.
Well, that brings us to the end of today's podcast. But if you haven't done so already, I'll encourage you to subscribe to your favourite podcast channel. The International Society for Physical Activity and Health podcast is available on all of the leading podcast channels, including Apple, Spotify, Google. If you've got an idea for a podcast, you can send that through to info@ispah.org. Thank you very much for listening, and we hope you can join us on our podcast again soon.